and talk while you're doing that? So back in April, 32 people joined me and a few other leaders heading to Israel. Many of us refer to this as the Holy Land, but I got a good friend who says, no, the whole earth is the Lord's. And so the whole earth is holy. This is the land of the Bible. And so I've been using Bible lands to replace the term Holy Land. I think it makes sense for me. We were gone for about 12 days, left Indianapolis and left Chicago, flew to Istanbul for a very fast layover, and then to Tel Aviv, landed late at night, and ended up staying at a little resort town called Netanya, in a hotel that we go to every time. It's a good place to sort of acclimate and get the results from our COVID tests that, of course, we have to do. We actually had to take two to get into it, one to get into Israel and one to get on the bus. So we had two different COVID tests that we had to take. So we go to the first hotel to sort of recuperate from the trip, get our COVID results back, and then we hit the ground running. And one of the first places we go is a town on the west coast, there on the Mediterranean. This is Caesarea. Many of you have probably heard of Caesarea. A man named Philip in the Bible was from Caesarea, as well as many other things happened here. But Caesarea is the first sort of introduction to what I consider the main attribute of Israel is the importance of archaeology there. Our guide said, we were talking about the role of religion. He goes, the only national religion Israel has is archaeology. And archaeology defends their right to exist sort of in that land. And so they take archaeology very, very seriously. In fact, most of Caesarea has been in recent years uncovered. In fact, there's the hippodrome where they would do the horse racing, was just uncovered about 20 years ago when they were trying to upgrade their parking lot. And in the process discovered, hey, this has been built right over an ancient hippodrome. So you can see all the way down. Caesarea is great because it's got medieval crusader fortresses. In fact, in the far distance, that building there is an old crusader building. And you're walking through history the entire time. So we spent some time in Caesarea, and then we head up north along the coastline to the Mount Carmel area. Go ahead and turn there. So Mount Carmel, if you know your Old Testament, is where Elijah and the prophets of Baal had a big showdown. There's a Carmelite order of nuns that have a convent there, and they open that up to the public. So right now I'm standing on the roof of this convent looking out over this big valley, the Jezreel Valley, also known as Megiddo, which, if you know some Bible stuff, you know that we're looking over is called the Valley of Armageddon. And it's very cool. You can see the importance of agriculture up here in the northern portion of Israel. You can, just in that little section, we can see some olive trees there in the foreground. If you go down in the lower valley, there's all kinds of wheat and other grains, nuts, vegetables, fruit. Everything is being grown in this, that you can imagine being grown, is being grown. You go down a little south, you get some grapefruit and some lemons. Up here, you're going to get lots of apples and fruit like that. But yeah, we're in the north section right here. And from here, we head towards the Sea of Galilee. There's the Sea of Galilee right there. We arrive in the evening after a full day, and we caught actually, that's the sunrise. But we caught the evening, went down to the Sea of Galilee, cut some photographs there. We stay at a kibbutz. Anyone familiar with the term kibbutz? So those of you who are not, in the early days of Israel's statehood, kibbutz was sort of a frontier settlement that people went to, and they farmed it, they developed it, they defended it. And so these kibbutzes are often placed in strategic locations around the border. As Israel developed, the kibbutz's main purpose changed from a place of sort of defense to making money. These were usually socialistic enterprises. Everyone sort of contributed money to make them happen, and then gained their livelihoods by working on them. And it was all shared. However, there are very few of those originally designed kibbutzes left. Most of them have been privatized and the assets divested to the individual members. They're very prosperous places now. If you've ever had Caesar stone put into your kitchen, that comes from a kibbutz on the Caesarea area. This kibbutz is on the Sea of Galilee. It's a residential area. It's a lodging, hotel, and we stayed there for a couple of days. Beautiful place. And a perfect location to do our journeys up into the north of Israel. So one of the places that as you go north, you can go ahead and turn. As you go north, you get into what doesn't look much like Israel, at least in our popular imaginations. It's not dry, it's not dusty, it's very lush and green, and there's a lot of ancient settlements up there. This is the settlement of Dan, and you can see that's the old walls of the Dan settlement. I love the size of those stones, and it's pretty impressive to know that was built without cranes or other machinery, just by human labor. So Dan is an ancient settlement there. One of the tribes of Israel was the Dan tribe. Dan always wrestled with the worship of monotheism versus polytheism. And go ahead and turn to the next slide. Up here on the top, you can look over and see how much that sort of looks like southern Indiana from certain vantage points. Lots of trees, just beautiful. But up in that area, there's an altar that was by turns an altar to Jehovah and an altar to whatever the popular god was at the time. So they wrestled back and forth with that. Dan is a really cool place. There's so many little rivers and rivulets that run through that area. All of them sort of pour into what will become the Sea of Galilee. Let's go to the next slide. I think, yeah. So we're up on the northern border with Syria, and we were privileged to be able to go up to a recently decommissioned military outpost. So we're on top of this mountain looking over into Syria, where the 6 Days War happened back in the 60s, 1967. Our tour guide was a general in that war. And so he had a very firsthand account of what happened there. You can see their border is fairly flimsy. I've seen better fencing on our family farm. And that's not saying a lot. But yeah, right there it is. Across that little barbed wire, you are into Syria. So if you know anything about the 6 Day War, it was strategic for the future of Israel and secured that portion of land for them. They have fairly good relationships right now, enough that they don't feel the need to maintain this military installation there. We are in the Golan Heights. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly where we are, up in the Golan Heights. Yeah, so up in the Golan Heights as well, in the north portion of Israel, there's a mountain called Mount Hermon. I think that's the next slide, Mount Hermon, as they say there. And if you know your Psalms, there's a Psalm 133 where the psalmist talks about how wonderful it is when brothers live together in unity. And as a Rotarian, you probably should know that because that's what we're about. But he describes this, he says there's a blessing that happens when brothers live together in unity. And he describes that blessing as the dew or the water that comes off the mountain. And that mountain is the primary source of water that you will get into the Jordan and then ultimately into the Galilee. So that a lot of water comes off that. It's much greener, much wetter in the north of Israel than you think you would imagine. Now, again, we were there after the spring rains, after the winter. So we really benefited from the greenery and the lushness. But
how does the greenery, as an example, compare to their neighbors, Israel's versus?
Well, so if you go back, you can see there's a little bit of difference. Of course, most of the green we see here, a lot of it is agriculture, so it's cultivated greenery. But even when you get up north, there's a lot of just wild greenery as well. That's typical of the general landscape. But again, there's a stewardship of the land that you see there that's different than some of the other surrounding areas. And you see that even down into more of the Arab controlled areas. There's a different sense of how to steward the land. And it's obvious. You can see it's visible to the naked eye that there's a different approach to that.
My understanding, They turned a desert into the green.
Yeah, and you see when you get down to the middle, like into the Galilee, south of Galilee, those plains there, you would absolutely see that, because on either side you see dusty, dry mountains, and then there in the valley, it is just beautiful. So from a farmer's perspective, absolutely beautiful. From everyone else's perspective, it's very nice and green. So you absolutely see that very, very distinctly in the middle section. So up here in the north, we visited Caesarea Philippi. We visited Bethsaida, where Jesus healed a blind man. Nazareth, Cana, a little town called Magdala, which the Bible doesn't mention at all, except in relationship to a woman named Mary, who was from that area. And that's a really cool place. Recent archaeological discoveries in Magdala have uncovered this synagogue that they can trace back to the time that Jesus would have been in Israel. And so, from a church perspective, that's very fascinating to be standing right there where literally, you're walking on the floor of where some of the fishermen, Jesus's disciples, could have walked along those same mosaic pathways. So that's cool. And again, around the Sea of Galilee, all the hillsides where most of the gospel stories take place there. So we were in the north for a little bit, headed down south to the Dead Sea. Look at that picture. I'm going to talk about it later. It's out of order, but we'll talk about these guys at a later point. Go on to the next one. So we get down to the Dead Sea. Along the way, we go through the West Bank, visit a few places there. I have pictures from way back, but you can't just show everything. So here I am. I think we're on the 17th floor of this beautiful hotel looking over the Sea of Galilee. And I like the contrast there, not the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea. I like the contrast of the blue of the sea, and then the barrenness of the wilderness there on the side, and then the lushness or the oasis there that they've put there at the Dead Sea. When I first went to Israel and I knew we were going to the Dead Sea, I pictured it just dirt and sand and salt water. So you get down there and you realize, oh my word, this is like a major resort area for Israelis to come and spend long holidays. And there's 20 or 30 large luxury hotels. It's a very, very, lots of shopping, lots of westernized shopping there as well. So that's a cool place. We hung out there, gave ourselves a little bit of a break, and then we headed up north again. We made a stop along the way to Masada. I don't think I've got any pictures of Masada, but many of you might know Masada. It's an ancient fortification there. It sits on a high plateau, and the history is that some Jewish rebels retreated there from Rome. There were over 900 of them that Rome sort of surrounded them, and they were besieged for a long period of time. Finally, they made a suicide pact among themselves, and rather than succumb and give themselves over to an uncertain future with the Romans, and their wives and their children to an uncertain future with the Romans, they killed themselves. So when the Roman soldiers, Josephus says, when he got up there, it was just devastating to see what had happened.
Did you go up on top?
Yeah. So there's several ways you can go up. You can walk up the back. It's a bit of a hike, but the last two times we went, they've got a gondola that you put 60 people in, and
that's the
you
old
just
ramp,
cross your fingers and hope no one has COVID on that thing.
The walk up is the old Roman ramp.
That's the old ramp. Yeah, the old Roman ramp on the back side, and we've done that. It takes about 30 minutes to do it. It's not a horrible walk, but it's a steep walk. So you want to be in your peak physical condition. This is a little oasis called En-Gedi Nature Preserve. En-Gedi is where David, running from King Saul, would have went and hid. But this is a really cool place. I love it because it's fresh springs coming out of these rocks. You can see all sorts of wildlife in this area, foxes and the ibex and some different types of birds. You never know what you're going to see there, but it's a little walk back and it's fun. And of course, you always see people splashing around, little kids splashing around in the water, and different religious sects will gather here, and you can observe how they are portrayed there at this little watering hole. It's a nice little, you got Christians and Jews and Muslims and various variations of Jewishness there as well. It's always a cool place for us to visit. Our next slide is just some random hills at first, you think, but if you can look up, you see some little caverns and caves in that lower ridge line right there. Those were where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. And so some little Arab boys were playing in the mountains, and came across these scrolls and pulled them out, and they were sort of tossed around between different groups for a while and traded for a little bit of this, a little bit of that, until someone from New York recognized in a sort of an antiquities magazine that there's something to these scrolls for sale, and flew over and contracted to buy them for like $100 or something. It wasn't much at all. We find out later that they're priceless. And so that's, I would have loved to have stopped and walked over there, but our bus basically slowed down as we were driving by. So we're trying to get as many photographs as we can get. So from there, we head over to the Jordan. We had a few in our group that wanted to be baptized. And so the Jordan River is there. It's really cool. I don't have a picture of it, but there's
Next.
yeah, right here. No, keep it on the soldiers. So there at the Jordan, though, you always see some young soldiers, and they're everywhere. Military security is a big deal in Israel, of course, and these young ladies seem very young to be securing. We're right on the Jordanian border. They can look out and see across the way Jordanian soldiers on the other side of the Jordan River. But they're always perfectly willing to get their picture taken. And with limited English skills, they are happy to communicate with you. So that's always fun. Military service is mandatory for Israeli citizens over the age of 18, unless you're Muslim, and then you can opt out of that, or Arab, then you can opt out of that. There's another group of people called the Druze, and they live up in the Golan Heights, the mountains. It's compulsory for them as well. So exemptions can be made on religious grounds, physical grounds, psychological grounds, but for the most part, every Jewish girl or boy at the age of 18 enters into mandatory military service. So from there, we leave and we're heading back up to Jerusalem, to the center. We go past Jericho and Bethlehem, and we end up at the Mount of Olives. And this is where we're standing right here, looking out across Jerusalem. A very iconic scene. You see the dome of the rock, the golden dome there. It's a mosque there on Temple Mount, and about the place where historians, archaeologists believe that Solomon's temple, Herod's temple, would have stood in the general zone. That's our first introduction to Jerusalem. From there, we wander down. Right below that is the Garden of Gethsemane. We spend some time there, and then we start working our way back up. Go ahead to the next one. Let's see. Oh, here we are. So we don't actually get to the Temple Mount until the next morning. We get there really, really early, because every other time we've been there, it's been packed. So we get there as early as we can, get there and realize we're basically the only ones here. Israel had really just opened up after COVID, and so we had no crowd competition at all. So Temple Mount is patrolled and manned and overseen by the Antiquities Authority. It is officially forbidden from the Orthodox rabbis' position for Jews to go and pray on the Temple Mount, not until the new temple will be built. But it is a holy place for Muslims. And so this was the week of Ramadan. And so you can see there's a number there on the arches. And all over Temple Mount, you'll see these numbers, and those signify where the different Muslim groups would gather. So in order to sort of control the population a little bit and create some organization out of the chaos, they assign different locations for different groups. So that's what that number signifies. The next slide that I wanted to show you was the one at the base of Temple Mount, the Western Wall and the Wailing Wall, one of my favorite places to visit. The men go to one side, the women go to the other side. The men have to wear a kippah or a yarmulke when they go in to cover their heads. But it's really cool to see these, and they're primarily Orthodox, so they're all dressed in black. They have the prayer boxes strapped around their arms or on their head. They've got the prayer shawls, they've got their prayer books, and they're praying. And of course, any visitor, any male visitor and female visitor, male visitors who will cover their heads, can take a piece of paper, write a prayer on it, and stick it into the Wailing Wall. It's always one of my favorite mornings there. I wish I had a picture, but you've seen pictures, and use your imaginations.
Did you sneak any peeks?
Sneak any peeks?
Yeah, where are the prayer requests?
I didn't sneak any. Listen, I've got my own prayers, Ray, to worry about. I don't worry about other people's prayers. But there was a cool place there at Temple Mount, or at the Western Wall. It's sort of a synagogue tucked into the side of the wall, a little tunnel, just for men, of course. But in inclement weather, they'll pray in there. And I've got a chance the last couple of times to sneak in there, kind of just wander around like a forbidden visitor in there. This last time they caught me before I could go in and said, no. You're not dressed right. You don't look right. You can't go in here.
Imagine that.
We were there, we put our prayer requests in the crack.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to cite for women.
Yeah.
So we were able to stick our little paper.
Yeah.
On the cracks.
Absolutely. That's what you do. And everyone does that. So it's one of my favorite ones. From there, we head down the hillside to the old city of David, and that's where David's palace. They say they've been doing some archaeological exploration, and there actually is a place there that looks like it was a very nice home of a prosperous person. They say it could have been David's palace there, and it's sitting high enough on the ridge that if you were walking out on the roof in the evening, you could look down on other houses and see perhaps some young woman bathing in the cool of the evening. So I don't know about that, but it's a place we gather. I'm here. What I'm looking at right now here is called Hezekiah's Tunnel. And this tunnel dates back to the time of King Hezekiah in the Bible, who in an attempt to sort of forestall the impact the Assyrians were going to have on the siege of Jerusalem, he took some proactive measures and had a tunnel built. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as a conduit. I think that's what 2 Kings refers to it as, a conduit to bring the water in from in the valley up inside the city walls. And so this rock was this carved out to let the kids or young girls or women get the water, which would have been the customary way to do it in a way that was safe. And it's a fun thing to do as well. You need to be able to kind of wedge yourself through tight places. This might be the last time I'll ever be able to do it, honestly, unless something dramatic changes in my life. So I'm glad I got to do it at least 3 times. It's fun. Lots of stairs, though, honestly, is the harder part. Stairs and just uneven surfaces as you walk down. So that was a lot of fun. I don't know what the next slide is, but let's jump to it. Okay, yeah, because we were one of the first groups in, this place normally is shoulder to shoulder tourists, packed into these streets with stalls on either side selling all kinds of just valuable and junk, honestly. So I took a picture of this. I was telling the people I was with, I said, you don't understand the fact that we're able to walk down this road with this much, leisure is astounding. But every place we went, and I'm going to refer you back to the picture I had of the 2 guys I'm standing between them. He was a shop owner from Lexington, Kentucky. That's where he makes his home. So we talked a little bit about that. He had just opened up he's got 3 stalls. He's just opened 3 of them up in the last 3 weeks. He goes, you're some of the first people that have been here. So he was less interested in selling us his leather goods as he was talking about what our experience had been in the, you can if you want. I'm not sure how far back it goes. There he is right there. Yeah, the guy in the dress shirt is now, of course, he's Israeli, but he makes his home in Lexington, Kentucky normally. And I ended up buying a wallet from him just because he was so nice and spent so much time just talking to us without any sales pressure at all. And this young man is one of his sales associates. I was going to buy a wallet from him, and I said, how much? He goes, 60 shekels, which is it's about $50. So he goes to change money, and my new friend says, how much did he charge you? I said 60. He goes, only give him 30. I go, okay, it's your business. We'll do that. So the guy came back and goes, no, you only charge him 30. So that's not normally how it works when you're negotiating with the merchants there in those side streets. So I felt like I was. What ended up happening is it's a long story. How much time do we have? I feel like we're almost out of time. Are we out of time?
No.
Okay. You give me a heads up. So our little group had gathered there on the road, and when you're in a foreign country, you assume no one understands what you're saying. So we were over there laughing about something that had happened with a merchant up a little ways away. And he's standing there, he goes, you know, we could all enjoy the story if you would talk louder. And all of a sudden, I mean, I just go white thinking, what have I said? I am so embarrassed. And so I don't know what, you know, in your diplomatic way, I said, oh, we were just talking about the differences in, you know, the way people promote their product. So he laughed a little bit. And so we talked to him for probably 30 minutes while we were waiting on the rest of our crew. And then got to know where he was from and what his story was. He recommended a few restaurants for us. And so we were having lunch a little later. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go buy something from that guy because it was just a great personal relational experience there. And as Rotarians, we want to develop great community relationships. And so I went back and said, I like you and I like your store. I like your product. And I want to buy something from you. So I bought a little wallet here. So yeah, camel skin.
Is it the one? Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice.
So there's a little story there.
That's a real, you never hand the treasurer your wallet.
Well, knowing that I just had 20 in it, I gave it away. It's pretty safe to trust at this point in time. Okay, let's just jump ahead real quick here. We were at next one. Oh, here's another. So we had this cool day where we had nothing scheduled. We had a day at the Dead Sea where it was just really R&R. And this was the day as well where we're just wandering through. And these are two of the ladies. In fact, Kim Cox is from Bedford. She's the lady in blue. And then she was a doctor from Columbus, I believe. And we're walking around and we're walking through this little side streets. Again, it's so quiet and so empty. You feel like you're neglecting something if you don't explore a little bit. And so we went down this little path and we see this Jerusalem Santa door. And we're like, what is this? And so we're looking at it and these ladies come up and take a picture. And as I'm taking a picture, a guy on the top, sort of looking over the parapet, the flat roof parapet, he goes, hey, where are you from? And we said Bloomington, Indiana, which is where the majority of our group was. He goes, oh, Bobby Knight. I go, how do you know Bobby Knight? He is a basketball player. And he said, I had a basketball camp when I played basketball in the US with Bobby Knight. So I said, well, that's really cool. So are you the Jerusalem Santa? He goes, yes, I am. He's Catholic. And so he said, I'm the only Santa, I think, in Israel. So he's got this place and you can drop your letters off to Santa and during the right season, go in and he'll play the Santa role. His name, this is very interesting. His name is Isa Anis Kasisik. He attended a Bobby Knight basketball camp. He is, and he coaches basketball there. So there's a Jerusalem ball team and he's their coach. I've got a picture of him on another flyer, but we talked to him for quite a while. He said, listen, if anyone's coming to Israel, we need candy canes. We can't get them here. And because I give them away, I can't afford to just have them shipped in. So if you know anyone going to Israel, have them throw some candy canes in their luggage and bring them to me. I want to give them away. So I love those days where you're sort of off script and you just begin to explore and you have some really cool interactions with people. And then I think the last slide I have is this right here. So this is a kippah, and this is the yarmulke or the little round hat that you would put on your head if you were going to the Western Wall to pray or going into a synagogue to pray. And we found one that was hand-stitched. He made sure he told me, hand-stitched. This was made by hand. Of course it was. You know, it's pretty custom there. And he convinced me to buy it. And I won't even tell you the ridiculous sum I paid for that. It is one of my most treasured possessions at this point in
It won't
time.
be through the February giveaway
Yeah.
stuff.
No, it's not. I thought about getting it to Adam Strasser, who's the new pastor at Free Methodist. I really honestly bought it for him because we have a shared story. So it's for him, but don't tell him because it'll be his gift at some point in time. So that was pretty much it. We finished up the trip. The next day was another sort of relaxing day in the morning. Ramadan was hitting. It was Sabbath. Nothing was open, and we were due to have dinner with a rabbi, a local rabbi and his family that evening. And we do that every time we go to do a Sabbath meal on a Friday night with them. And it's a wonderful. I would call it a ministry in my culture. A wonderful thing they do, outreach, is they invite religiously observant Jews to open their homes to religiously observant travelers. And they invite them in to share a traditional meal with them. They walk them through the evening Sabbath prayers and the protocols and the processes. You get a chance to hear their story, where they came from. Our guy was a rabbi from New Jersey who has 10 children. And about 5 years ago, he and his family left New Jersey to relocate and move to Israel. So all in all, a great trip. You have to take a COVID test to get back in the US. And that's where our troubles really began, because 5 of our people tested positive for COVID. They had to stay behind for 5 days, no, a week actually, before they had to test negative. And then they were released. They stayed, as far as we know, we can figure out, Israel covered the expenses for that week. They put them in a little hotel and fed them 3 meals a day. And they got home. We got home a week before Easter. They got home the Saturday night before Easter morning. So, but even then, I talked to a few of them. They're like, "Oh yeah, we would totally do it again." So, what you didn't see were all the other amazing pictures that you can make yourself if you travel with me in 2 years to Israel. So if you're interested, be happy to talk about that. Any other questions?
Yeah. Would you view Israel as very secular, or?
I would say primarily, I would say it operates in a secular culture. There are a few places where you bump up against the religious aspects of Israel, and it really is the Western Wall. Other than that, and the Sabbath meal. Other than that, there are very few places where you're going to feel like a sort of a religious outsider. The only places really that our group felt any sort of pushback on that was going into some of these the Catholic cathedrals and monasteries and convents, where there had to be, you have to have shoulders covered, and ladies and men can't have shorts on. Guys sometimes will have to wear a hat or take off a hat, but for the most part, I would say it's a fairly secular culture.
I just wonder, you think, how many people in this country go to church on Sunday? Percentage-wise.
Yeah.
How would it compare?
So our guy, David, he is a secular Jew. He will go, he says, I go on high holy days to temple. Other than that, he's not observant in the sense that, like, our rabbi would be for a Sabbath meal. And I think from what I can see, that seems to be pretty typical. In Tel Aviv, for example, Tel Aviv is a very modern city compared to Jerusalem, for example. Jerusalem, you're going to come into more of a religious element there, but Tel Aviv, it could be Chicago for all that's worth. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And there were some shootings, like in Chicago.
All right. Next week is Rowena has the meeting, and she's having Stephanie Williams, Jones Lemon Seed, will he come? And then the week after that, Emily has the meeting. And then the week after that, just to give you a heads up, the 23rd, we will actually have our meeting at the Oakland City building. Doug Conrad and Larry Parsons are going to give us a tour of the facility, talk about what they're doing. I'm still trying to nail down exactly the food situation. I've already talked to Belinda because he said they're not sure they're going to have tables, but they have this outside pavilion. So we may do like a sack lunch type thing and have Belinda bring that. So that's where we are with the program over the next few weeks. All right. The things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And is it fun?
Program.